On a bright summer afternoon outside Denver, sunlight spilled across the dusty gravel road like liquid gold. Lily, tiny in her pastel pink jacket, blue jeans and brown boots, held the worn envelope that had changed her life only hours earlier. Shadow, her loyal German shepherd, padded beside her, tail low but eyes sharp, as they approached the old farm her grandmother had left behind. But the moment Lily stepped onto the sun-bleached porch, Shadow stopped. Ears up, muscles tight, breath held. The summer air, warm and humming with cicadas, suddenly felt too still. Shadow released a deep, rumbling growl, soft but serious enough to make Lily freeze in place. Sunlight flooded the yard, yet the open barn at the back of the property held a patch of darkness that refused to brighten, as if the shadows there were choosing to stay. Something inside that darkness shifted, slow, deliberate, watching them. The neighbors had whispered that this farm had secrets her grandmother never spoke aloud. Lily didn't believe in ghosts, only in finding a home. But when Shadow stepped backward, lips lifting ever so slightly, she understood one thing. This inheritance held far more than land and memories. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these stories alive. The heat of a Denver summer afternoon pressed against the city like a giant hand, flattening the shimmering streets beneath a sky so blue it looked carved from polished glass. The orphanage yard baked beneath the sunlight, the cracked pavement gleaming white-hot, and the air trembled with the buzzing chorus of cicadas hiding in the sparse trees that offered almost no shade. On the rusted swing set at the far corner sat 8-year-old Lily, a small but strikingly pretty American girl whose soft blonde hair curled naturally at the ends, framing her light freckles and wide blue eyes that shimmered like lake water. She wore the same outfit she clung to for comfort every day, her pastel pink jacket slightly oversized on her thin shoulders, faded blue jeans and brown low-ankle boots that made her look like a pint-sized traveler always ready for a journey. Beside her lay her companion, Shadow, a large German shepherd about 3 years old, with a strong, muscular frame, deep black and tan fur that glimmered beneath the sun, and warm amber eyes always alert to the world. Shadow had been assigned as a therapy dog for the orphanage, but somehow he had attached himself specifically to Lily. His loyalty was unshakable, his protective instincts immediate, and his calm nature around the children contrasted sharply with the fierce growl he reserved for strangers who got too close. The hot wind stirred the loose gravel as a figure approached, Mrs. Henderson, the social worker assigned to Lily. She was a woman in her late 40s with a tall, willowy build, straight dark hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, and thin, silver-rimmed glasses that always slid a little down her nose. Her face carried a permanent expression of gentle concern. Deep lines at the corners of her mouth suggested decades of soft-spoken empathy mixed with unspoken exhaustion. She walked toward Lily with a purposeful stride, clutching a thick, cream-colored envelope. When she knelt beside the swing, Shadow rose to his feet, tail stiff, but the woman reached out slowly with a calm hand, letting him sniff her fingers. Only after Shadow relaxed and sat again did she turn her attention to the girl. "Lily," she said in the warm, steady tone she used for difficult news, "a letter came for you this morning, from a law office." Lily blinked up at her, pushing a strand of hair from her cheek. She rarely received anything personal, and the weight of the envelope felt strange in her small hands. Inside it, she found documents, signatures, and at the very center, a letter from an attorney stating that Margaret Eleanor Price, her maternal grandmother, a woman Lily could barely remember except for a distant scent of cinnamon and wood, had passed away. She had left Lily a farm in another state, a place of green fields, an old farmhouse, a barn, and a legacy that belongs to you, as the letter phrased it. Lily's brows furrowed as she tried to understand. She had not seen her grandmother since she was a toddler, and the woman had never visited or written. The realization settled into her chest like warm, uncertain weight. Someone had thought about her. Someone had planned for her. Within hours, Mrs. Henderson secured the legal approval to transport Lily to the property. The woman packed Lily's few belongings, 2 worn shirts, a pair of socks, a small sketchbook, and Shadow, who refused to leave her side, climbed into the back seat of the old agency SUV as if he understood everything. As the vehicle pulled out of Denver and merged onto the highway stretching across the open summer plains, Lily pressed her forehead to the glass. Rows of tall grass shimmered gold under the sunlight. The sky widened. The world felt bigger than she had ever imagined. Shadow sat beside her, head resting on her knee, his tail thumping gently every time she shifted. The hum of the engine mixed with the rhythm of tires against asphalt, soothing her nerves as the city disappeared behind them. They drove for hours, through rolling hills, past clusters of pine forests, and into a valley bathed in amber evening light. When the car finally turned onto a gravel driveway, Lily's breath caught. Before her stood a white wooden farmhouse with green shutters, its paint peeling but charming, a wraparound porch sagging slightly with age, and behind it, a long red barn glowing under the fading sun. The air smelled of warm hay and distant wildflowers. It felt like stepping into a memory she didn't know she had. Mrs. Henderson parked and helped Lily down, brushing dust from the girl's sleeve. Shadow jumped out after her, nose twitching as he explored the unfamiliar scents. They approached the barn first, drawn by its size and the faint metallic scent drifting from within. The sliding wooden door was heavy, its surface scratched by years of weather and work. Lily braced both hands on the handle, pushing with the strength of someone far smaller than the task required. The door groaned open, sending a slice of golden light across the dark interior. Dust floated like tiny stars in the beam of sunlight. Shadow stepped forward and froze. The fur along his spine lifted straight up, a visible ripple of instinct and warning. His body tensed, head lowered, and a deep growl, soft but unmistakably protective, rose from his chest. Lily's heart skipped. At the far end of the barn, where the tack room sat in shadow, something shifted, just enough to disturb the darkness. Something, or someone. Morning sunlight spilled across the farmhouse like warm honey, bright and relentless, flooding through the thin curtains of Lily's small bedroom. She woke curled beside Shadow, still wearing her pastel pink jacket, as if it were a shield she never removed. Shadow, with his thick black and tan fur and calm, watchful amber eyes, rose and stretched, his large paws tapping softly on the wooden floor. The farmhouse smelled faintly of pine dust and old lavender, and the boards creaked under their feet as they walked into the hallway. Waiting for her in the kitchen was Tom Sullivan, the property manager her grandmother had trusted for decades. Tom was a man in his late 50s, tall with a sturdy build shaped by years of farm work, his skin weathered to a deep brown from sun and wind. His hair was salt and pepper and tied loosely at the back of his neck, giving him the look of someone who preferred action over words. His square jaw was lined with faint stubble, and his eyes, grayish-blue like cold river water, held both patience and a hint of lingering sorrow, as if he carried old regrets he never spoke about. When he smiled, it was small and cautious, but undeniably kind. "Morning, kiddo," he said with a voice gravelly from early rising. "Figured you'd want to see the place in daylight." Lily nodded shyly, gripping Shadow's collar. Tom led her through the farmhouse first, explaining which switches controlled which ancient lights and which floorboards squeaked too loudly. Everything inside was modest but bright. Sturdy wooden tables, hand-carved chairs, shelves lined with jars of screws, sandpaper, and small wooden figurines. Lily touched one, a little bird carved with meticulous detail, and Tom explained that her grandmother sculpted them when she needed to think. "She had good hands," he murmured, voice warm with respect. "Steady hands, quiet heart." After breakfast, he guided her outside. The summer sun glared from a clear sky, casting sharp shadows across the yard. The red barn towered behind the farmhouse, weathered but strong, its doors slightly ajar. Lily approached cautiously, Shadow glued to her side, tail still but ears pricked. Inside, the barn unfolded into a world she never expected. A workshop sprawled before her, long wooden tables cluttered with chisels and planes, electric saws gleaming under shafts of sunlight, jars of varnish and oil stacked neatly in rows, and planks of wood arranged by type and thickness. But what stunned her most were the finished pieces: chairs with graceful curved backs, cabinets with intricate carvings, tables sanded until they glowed. It felt like stepping into someone's mind, a place built from grief, skill, and love. Tom crossed his arms, watching her take it in. "Your grandma was one of the best makers in this valley," he said softly. "Taught herself everything after your grandfather passed." His voice dipped at the memory, hinting at a story too heavy for the moment. Meanwhile, Shadow trotted around, sniffing corners, glancing back at Lily as though making sure she approved of their new kingdom. Then they reached the far end of the barn, a smaller door, thick, old, and locked. Its hinges were blackened with age, and a faded wooden sign hung crookedly above it. Taped to the door was a sealed envelope with Lily's name written in trembling handwriting. Her fingers shook as she opened it. Inside was a letter from her grandmother, written in the same shaky script. "Behind this door is my greatest secret, your key to understanding where you come from and who you can become. But keys must be found, not handed." Tom rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "If there's a key," he reasoned, "it'll be inside the house. Your grandma didn't hide things far." He suggested they start searching. Under the bright afternoon sun, Lily and Shadow returned to the farmhouse. The scavenger hunt was both thrilling and eerie. She opened drawers filled with dusty recipe cards, sorted through old yarn baskets, peeked behind picture frames showing stern ancestors. Shadow sniffed cupboards, stuck his nose under furniture, and wagged his tail whenever he found an interesting scent, usually flour or old boots. Lily crawled under tables, examined shelves, and climbed onto counters with surprising determination. As shadows began to grow longer across the floor, Lily moved toward the staircase. A faint draft slipped from beneath the steps. Curious, she knelt down, pushing aside a loose board. Shadow pressed his head beside her, snout working overtime. Behind the panel was a narrow hollow space. Inside it lay a small carved wooden box, barely larger than a book, etched with swirling floral patterns, the same patterns decorating the furniture in the barn. Lily's breath caught. She eased the box out, its surface smooth and cool in her hands. When she opened it, a soft creak whispered through the quiet house. Inside lay a tarnished brass key, ornate with tiny engraved vines, and beneath it, nestled carefully in a cloth pouch, a USB drive labeled in her grandmother's looping handwriting. But before Lily could process the discovery, the sound of tires crunching over gravel thundered through the quiet valley. A vehicle, large, dark-colored, and unfamiliar, rolled into the driveway. Shadow immediately stiffened, ears up, tail rigid. Through the dusty window, Lily saw a tall figure stepping out, a man she had never seen before, moving with deliberate confidence toward the house. Shadow growled low. Someone had arrived, and they were not moving slowly. The knock on the door came just as Lily tightened her grip on the carved wooden box. Shadow stood rigid beside her, hackles high, his deep growl rolling through the hallway like distant thunder. Through the dusty window, she could see the tall figure already approaching the house. But as the door swung open, the tension in the air shifted. The man was not a looming threat. He was young, clean-cut, and dressed in a charcoal gray suit that looked slightly too formal for a rural valley. He introduced himself as Evan Miller, assistant to Mr. Chambers. Evan was in his early 30s, slender and long-limbed, with sandy blonde hair neatly parted and a short beard framing a square jaw. His face carried the polished calm of someone trained to stay composed under pressure, yet his hazel eyes revealed a trace of nervous gentleness, as if he disliked being the bearer of intimidating news. He spoke politely, his voice smooth but firm, explaining that he was sent to deliver additional documents regarding the estate. He crouched slightly to be at Lily's eye level, careful not to startle Shadow. "Legally," he said, "you are the rightful owner of this farm. But I must warn you, because you're underage, some people may try to challenge your ownership or attempt to buy the property under questionable circumstances." His words carried an undercurrent of warning, like a storm forming behind sunny clouds. Shadow eventually eased, though he never took his eyes off the visitor. Evan offered a respectful nod before stepping back toward his car, leaving an envelope thick with legal papers on the kitchen table. Moments later, the sound of familiar voices rose from the porch. Linda Sullivan, Tom's wife, bustled in with the energy of a summer breeze. Linda was a plump woman in her mid-50s with warm brown skin, soft cheeks, and tightly curled gray-streaked hair gathered into a cheerful bun. She carried a large basket filled with fresh peaches, warm biscuits, and jars of homemade jam. There was something motherly in her round, expressive eyes and quick smile. She radiated the kind of warmth that made even strangers feel safe. When she spotted Lily, Linda enveloped her in a gentle hug, her apron smelling of cinnamon and sunshine. Tom followed behind her, quieter, but clearly softened by the scene. Linda bent down to scratch Shadow's chin, utterly unafraid of his size. "Oh, he's a handsome boy," she cooed. Shadow, surprisingly, allowed it. After a brief rest and a light meal Linda insisted on preparing, the group walked together to the barn. The air inside was cool and filled with the scent of wood shavings and varnish. Lily led the way toward the locked room at the back, the brass key trembling in her hand. When she turned the key in the ancient lock, the door opened with a long groan, revealing a small room bathed in soft, filtered sunlight. It felt almost sacred. Wooden shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound notebooks arranged carefully by date. A compact workbench sat near the corner, scattered with pencils and partially carved figurines. On the desk, Resting like a sleeping guardian was an old gray laptop plugged into a network of cables as if her grandmother had prepared it just for this moment. Linda brushed dust from the keyboard and pressed the power button. The screen flickered, glowed, and then came the face Lily had only glimpsed in fading memories. Her grandmother, Margaret Eleanor Price. She appeared older than Lily remembered, her silver hair tied back under a flour-dusted workshop apron. Her face was lined, her blue-gray eyes softened by age but filled with unmistakable intelligence. The background showed the same workshop walls Lily now stood inside. When her grandmother spoke, her voice was warm but edged with a lifetime of unspoken loss. "If you're watching this, my girl, then I'm no longer there to guide you in person. But I never stopped thinking of you. And I made these so you'd never be alone." Video by video, Margaret introduced woodworking techniques, how to read wood grain, how to sand with patience, how to listen to the voice of lumber as it revealed its shape. She told stories of Lily's great-grandfather carving the stone walls that bordered the property, and how she herself found healing through crafting furniture. Shadow lay beside Lily, head resting gently on her brown boot, lifting his ears every time Margaret's voice rose with emotion. But the peace shattered when Tom's phone began vibrating in his pocket. His face tightened as he answered. A short, sharp exchange followed. When he hung up, his expression was grim. "A development company from the next city over," he explained, jaw tightening. "They've been scouting this land for years. They think an 8-year-old can't manage the property. They're planning to come make an offer, and if that fails, they might try legal pressure." Lily's chest tightened. She looked around the room, at the journals, the laptop, the crafts, everything her grandmother had left behind. She didn't understand all the grown-up words, but she understood enough. Someone wanted to take her home away before she had even settled into it. That night, long after Tom and Linda returned to their own farmhouse down the road, Lily sat alone on the living room couch, laptop still warm beside her. She finished the third video, her grandmother teaching how to shape the curve of a chair leg, and felt a flicker of courage spark inside her small chest. Shadow slept at her feet, his breathing steady. Then tires screeched outside. Headlights flashed across the walls. Shadow bolted upright, barking sharply. Lily rushed to the window. A sleek black car, a luxury sedan, had stopped abruptly in the gravel. A tall woman stepped out. She was sharply dressed in a tailored cream-colored suit, her blonde hair pinned into a flawless twist. Her red lipstick gleamed under the porch light. She smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the slow, cold smile of someone evaluating the worth of something she planned to own. And she looked directly at the farmhouse, directly at Lily. The woman standing at the porch that night had the poise of someone who always expected doors to open for her. In the morning light, when she returned for a friendly chat, she looked even more intimidating. Victoria Collins, regional director of a rapidly expanding development company, was a woman in her early 40s with sharp cheekbones, sleek platinum blonde hair pulled into a severe twist, and skin so smooth it almost glowed beneath the sun. Her tall, slender frame was wrapped in an impeccable cream-colored suit, and every movement she made carried a quiet superiority, as though she were inspecting a valuable antique rather than speaking to an 8-year-old child. Her smile was polished and pleasant, but her pale gray eyes cut like fine glass. Victoria crouched to Lily's eye level, though the gesture felt more like a staged performance than genuine kindness. "Sweetheart," she said in a voice smooth as honey, "this land is a lot for a little girl to manage. My company can turn it into something beautiful. Gardens, parks, even a playground. All you need to do is sign a few papers, and I promise you'll be taken care of." She reached out, as though offering comfort, but Shadow stepped between them, stance rigid, eyes fierce. Victoria's smile tightened. "You have a very protective dog." Lily didn't speak. She clutched Shadow's collar, feeling her heartbeat thrum beneath her fingertips. Tom stood behind her, arms crossed, gaze steady and unblinking. He wasn't a man easily intimidated, especially not by polished shoes and promises wrapped in sugar. "This isn't a good time, Ms. Collins," he said in his gravelly voice, "and Lily won't be making any decisions today." Victoria rose gracefully, dusting invisible flecks from her suit. "Decisions have a way of catching up with us," she said lightly. "I'll be in touch." Her heels clicked sharply against the porch as she turned away, her silhouette cutting a confident line across the sunlit gravel. After she left, Lily escaped into the barn, needing the comforting scent of sawdust and old wood. She powered on the laptop on the small desk inside the secret room. The screen glowed, and her grandmother's familiar face reappeared. In the next video, Margaret stood beside a large, unfinished dining table, its dark walnut surface partially sanded, its legs carved but unassembled. "This was my last commission," she said softly. "A family waited years for it, but my hands grew too weak. If the next maker finishes this, perhaps the house will hear laughter again." Lily watched intently, eyes wide, the weight of her grandmother's words sinking like pebbles into a still pond. Suddenly, the unfinished table didn't feel like wood. It felt like a promise, a way to prove the land still lived, still breathed, still mattered. And if she could finish it, maybe people like Victoria Collins would stop seeing the property as empty. The next morning, under the blazing summer sun, Lily marched into the workshop with determination far larger than her small frame. Her pastel pink jacket, now speckled with old sawdust, hung loose across her shoulders. Tom stood close, watching her grip a handsaw that looked almost too big for her. "Slow and steady," he warned gently. Lily nodded, lips pressed together in fierce concentration. The first cut was crooked. The second was too shallow. The third was so uneven that Lily's cheeks flushed with frustration. Shadow, lounging near the doorway with his tail stretched across the warm floorboards, lifted his head every time Lily sighed. When she nicked her hand lightly against the sharp edge of the wood, Shadow trotted over and nudged her wrist, licking the small scratch with warm concern. Lily giggled despite her annoyance, rubbing his ears. Okay, she whispered. "I'll try again." Tom showed her how to brace her feet, how to angle her body, how to let the saw glide instead of forcing it. Lily copied his movements, clumsy but determined. She sanded until her arms ached, wiped sweat from her forehead onto her dusty sleeve, and kept going. Linda visited often, bringing lemonade and little encouragements. "Your grandma would be bursting with pride," she'd say, smoothing Lily's hair. "You're doing big work for such a little thing." But while the barn filled with effort and hope, pressure hammered from the outside. Letters arrived every morning, thin envelopes with thick threats. Victoria called repeatedly, her honeyed voice turning sharper with each unanswered message. "Think of your safety," she'd say. "Think of responsibility. You can't protect this place." Tom's jaw hardened each time her name appeared on caller ID. Yet each day, as Lily sanded the walnut tabletop and assembled its legs using her grandmother's instructions, She felt a growing warmth inside her, an anchor made of confidence and heritage. She wasn't alone. She had Shadow, who guarded the barn like a soldier, Tom, who stood by her like a steady oak, Linda, who filled silence with comfort, and her grandmother's voice guiding her through mistakes and triumphs. By late afternoon on the 7th day, the table gleamed with possibility. Lily ran her fingers across the smooth top, feeling the wood's heartbeat. She could almost hear the laughter her grandmother mentioned. Almost. But the sky outside had darkened unnaturally fast. Winds began whipping through the valley, bending the tall grasses and sending dust spiraling in frantic circles. The bright summer day collapsed into a churning gray storm. Tom shouted from the doorway that they should close up the barn before the gusts grew stronger. Lily darted toward the entrance, Shadow at her heels. Then it happened. A violent crack split the air as a thick branch tore free from an ancient maple tree. The wind hurled it downward like a spear aimed straight at the barn door, straight at Lily. Shadow lunged with a desperate bark, shoving her out of the way with all his strength. Lily felt her boots slide across the dirt, the world spinning sideways. The branch crashed down, splitting into jagged shards. Light flashed, white, blinding. Then everything folded into darkness. Lily woke to the scent of warm bread and sunlight. Her vision blurry for a moment as she blinked at the unfamiliar ceiling. When her eyes adjusted, she realized she was lying on the old floral sofa in Tom and Linda's living room. The morning light spilled through lace curtains, painting soft shapes across the wooden floorboards. Outside, the storm had vanished entirely. The valley gleamed under a sky so blue it felt as if the night before had been a bad dream. But Shadow's gentle whine reminded her it had been very real. The German shepherd lay curled beneath the sofa, one of his hind legs angled stiffly, a slight limp evident even in his resting posture. His fur was ruffled from the storm's chaos, but his amber eyes, alert, tender, full of unwavering loyalty, never left Lily's face. When she stirred, he thumped his tail once as if to say, "Are you all right?" Lily slid down from the sofa, wrapping her arms around his neck, burying her cheek in his warm fur. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice cracking with the weight of gratitude only a child can feel so fiercely. Linda bustled into the room with her signature energy, wearing a soft yellow dress sprinkled with flour from an early morning baking session. Her curly, gray-streaked hair was pinned loosely, framing her round face and earnest brown eyes. She smiled with relief when she saw Lily sitting up. "You gave us all quite a scare," she said gently. "But you're safe now. And Shadow, he's a hero." Tom followed behind her, his sturdy frame filling the doorway. His sun-weathered face softened as he crossed his arms, a hint of gruff affection shining through. "That dog's got more bravery than most grown men I've met," he muttered. Shadow lifted his head proudly, as if understanding every word. When Lily felt strong enough, Tom drove her back to the farm. The broken branch from the maple tree had already been hauled aside. Half a dozen neighbors were gathered around the barn, people Lily had seen only in passing. A tall, freckled farmer named Hank, who wore patched overalls and had a habit of stroking his ginger beard when thinking. An older woman named Marlene with silver hair braided down her back and hands calloused from decades of gardening. A pair of teenage twins, Jonah and Jill, both lanky and soft-spoken, who lived on the next property. Each of them brought something: a toolbox, a set of sanders, trays of warm food, and all greeted Lily with kind smiles. "We heard what happened," Marlene said, patting Lily's shoulder. "No storm's going to stop us from finishing what Margaret started." Inside the barn, the unfinished dining table stood waiting. A small scratch marked its edge, but it remained solid and beautiful. Together, the village worked under beams of golden sunlight that streamed through the open barn doors. Tom used his large hands, steady despite his age, to guide the sander. Hank measured the table legs with precision Marlene polished, the wood with practiced grace, humming softly. Lily, determined to contribute, traced the grain lines with her fingertips, following the rhythm of the wood, as her grandmother once described. Shadow kept watch near the door, occasionally limping forward to sniff a tool or nudge Lily's elbow, as if reminding her that she was not alone. By the time the family who had commissioned the table arrived, a kind couple in their late 40s with soft voices and gentle eyes, the barn was filled with warmth and the scent of fresh varnish. The couple introduced themselves as the Carltons. Mr. Carlton was a tall, slightly stooped man with warm brown skin and a carefully trimmed beard peppered with gray. His eyes were deep-set and thoughtful, the eyes of someone who carried stories quietly. His wife, Mrs. Carlton, was petite, with sandy hair pulled into a low ponytail and soft green eyes that glimmered with emotion as she approached the table. When Lily explained, haltingly, how her grandmother had prepared the design and how she had tried to finish it with the community's help, Mrs. Carlton knelt to eye level with the little girl. "Your grandmother's heart is in this table," she whispered, "and so is yours." Word about the finished table spread quickly. Soon, old customers of Margaret Price began arriving with pieces she had crafted decades earlier: rocking chairs worn smooth from use, cabinets with hinges that needed repair, little wooden animals missing ears or tails. They asked Lily if she could restore them, not because the girl was a master craftsman, but because they believed the legacy in her hands mattered. And in each repair, Lily felt her grandmother's presence guiding her. Meanwhile, Victoria Collins's efforts to seize the property gradually unraveled. Evan Miller returned with updated documents from Mr. Chambers, his calm hazel eyes bright with good news. "Your grandmother's will is airtight," he said, tapping the folder. "And now that the farm is active, producing income, and supported by the community, there's no legal basis for any challenge." When Victoria arrived a final time, her flawless composure cracked. "This isn't over," she snapped, though her voice wavered. Tom stepped forward, towering, hands planted on his hips. "For you, it is." Victoria narrowed her cold, gray eyes at Lily. "You're not a simple child, are you?" she hissed. Lily lifted her chin, one small hand gripping Shadow's fur. "I'm my grandma's granddaughter." Victoria left without another word. Years drifted by like warm winds across the valley. The farm blossomed into a haven. The workshop expanded. New tools filled the shelves. A garden grew beside the barn, and the orchard revived with bright apples each fall. Summers brought children from nearby foster homes, kids with uncertain futures and quiet sadness, who learned to carve, sand, plant, and build. Lily, now older but still wearing that beloved pink jacket, whenever she worked, taught them gently, repeating her grandmother's lessons. "The wood has a voice. Listen." Shadow aged with dignity, his muzzle whitening, his steps slower but still noble. He followed Lily everywhere, even if only at half the pace. One quiet summer evening, Lily placed a newly built memorial bench beneath the maple tree beside the barn. Its smooth surface gleamed in the sunset. She traced the carved inscription with gentle fingers. She built with her hands and taught with her heart. She sat down, Shadow settling at her feet, his tired head resting against her boot. As golden light wrapped the barn, the fields, and the bench in soft warmth, Lily understood something deep and certain. The farm wasn't an inheritance. It was a calling, a place for lost children to be found again, a place chosen not by blood, but by love. Sometimes, thus, the greatest miracles don't arrive with thunder or angels in the sky. Sometimes they come quietly, in the shape of a forgotten farm, a half-finished table, a loyal dog who refuses to let you fall, or a grandmother's love that continues long after she's gone. Many people believe God works like that, not always in grand gestures, but through small doors. He opens at the right moment, through people He sends into our lives when we need them most, through the strength He places in the hands of a child and the kindness He stirs in a community. Lily thought she inherited a piece of land, but she inherited something far greater, a calling, a second chance, a reminder that even in our loneliest seasons, we are never forgotten. Not by family, not by God, not by the world He quietly shapes around us. And maybe that's the message for all of us today. Sometimes the miracle you're praying for is already walking beside you, just like Shadow walked beside Lily. Sometimes, what feels like an ending is only God clearing the path for a brighter beginning. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need a bit of hope today. Leave a comment about the miracles, big or small, you've seen in your own life. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so these stories of faith, courage, and unexpected grace can continue finding their way to those who need them. May God watch over you, bless your home, and place His gentle hand on every step of your journey. Thank you for being here, and may His light guide you until we meet again in the next story.